everyone, welcome to the new episode of Life in Contradiction, the show that holds space for the real conversations about the challenges and often the injustices that are playing out for many people in society today. My name's Andi. It's great to be with you again for 2021, and we're broadcasting tonight in partnership with chaichat&community. Thanks for hosting us, Sel, and the Way Over There Collective, who are a collective of local artists and developers in the southeast of Melbourne who prioritise Black, Brown and Indigenous folk. But before I introduce you to the two people joining me tonight, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we broadcast from tonight and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm really excited to kick off tonight in our new format. And if you are watching live and you have any questions, please post below and we will address your questions. That would be great to interact with you tonight. And through our partnership with the Way Over There Collective, I'm really fortunate to be able to be joined by Jess Nilitina-Li tonight. Thanks so much for coming, Jess. How are you going?
No worries. Yeah, good to be here. I'm excited.
Awesome. And Jess and I are really excited to be joined with Diamond Sade, who is a data engineer, a data educator from the Southern New Hampshire University in the States, but also the creator and host of a really awesome podcast, Nahledge&Pettiness. Welcome, Diamond. Thanks so much for coming along.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
Oh, thank you. I was really excited actually when I found you on Facebook and was reading about your podcast, Nahledge&Pettiness, because it really connected me because it crosses over with a lot of areas that we are really keen to kind of create space for here on Life in Contradiction. And so the theme that would be great to chat about tonight, if it's okay, would be around what does it actually mean to really be your full self today, particularly in a society that can be quite dominantly binary and white. So it'd be great to tackle that with you tonight if you're willing. But it'd be really great just to, I guess, kick off and start with just learning a little bit more about you and your journey, particularly with the field that you're in. You know, what inspired you to work in this field and what's the journey been like for you?
It actually has been, it kind of fell in my lap. Like much of my life has just been like a series of really cool coincidences. And basically, growing up, I had actually never heard of engineering. I wasn't exposed to the career field throughout school or anything. And what kind of like catapulted me in this space was I worked at the St. Louis Science Center, and they had a 4-year program that exposed inner city youth to engineering. And once I got in that program, it really just changed everything about my life. That one program led me to the college that I eventually graduated from, and just opened the door to my passion for aerospace and so many things that I just don't think if I didn't go through that program, I don't know how I would have gotten in this space. So from there, I worked in traditional engineering for quite a bit, and eventually decided to follow my IT knack and get into data. I've always had some love for data in IT. And the opportunity to do a boot camp in data analytics presented itself, and that kind of carried me over to becoming a data engineer and an educator now. So kind of like, I guess God's plan in Drake voice. Like I don't know how else it would have happened without that one program.
That's awesome.
Amazing. And I'm wondering if there are any other key moments you can think of in the journey that have shaped you?
Yeah, I would say the biggest key moment in like my shaping would be that program. You know, like again, school never talked about engineering. They talked a lot about, I guess, more tangible trades or career fields that they felt maybe a Black girl from, inner St. Louis could achieve. So going to that program and actually being exposed to this career field, and having people believe in me. I had my supervisors calling me Professor Spiff. My nickname was Spiffy, and they would call me Professor Spiff. And that desire and they seeing me kind of seek knowledge is what kind of led me to pursue teaching and different things like that. So that kind of has been the most pivotal thing for me.
It's always really exciting to hear about women working in these sectors because, traditionally when they're represented in film or represented just generally across society, it's quite a male-dominated area. So I'm really keen, being in that sector. What's it like working as a data engineer?
Wow. Honestly, I would say my experience in data has been polar opposite to traditional engineering. And traditional engineering, every job that I went to, it was like I felt like I had to blend in. They would say, "Oh, we want diverse workforce," but really what they wanted was a simulation. So because I didn't necessarily assimilate to their culture or to the way they thought I should think or approach problems, I had a lot of challenging coworkers and managers. However, in the data space, I've learned and I've had more people being just treating me with equality, even though we're still a minority in data. There's still not a lot of Black women in either field. So, but I found data a lot more accepting than traditional engineering.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I guess that would be what you identify as some of the key, or one of the key blocks in your journey in this field. Were there any other key things that stand out as things that blocked you on your journey? Any roadblocks?
The biggest roadblock outside of just like getting in the field was a lot of the people that I dealt with. One way or another, I always felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. And they made it very apparent in their actions, the treatment of me. For example, in 2019, I was actually terminated from a job for typos. And the typos never made it to a customer. It never damaged any integrity of a product. But the person whose job it was to review my documentation actually started keeping copies of it and presented that information to HR stating that I was incompetent. So like dealing with that type of interaction where it's like my small errors were kind of put on front and center. That's been the biggest thing because I think we all have a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, hey, can I do this? Am I supposed to be here? But when you're in those spaces and they fuel that and confirm that, verbally or with their actions, it makes it really difficult to kind of see, hey, I belong.
How did you grapple with that? I'm wondering. Sorry, because I know imposter syndrome is something, so many people I know discuss and grapple with. And I'm wondering on your journey, how did you, or how are you? It's an ongoing always challenged by no matter what life stage we're at. But how do you grapple with that?
I think the biggest thing that I've been doing is reaching out for feedback first. I see that for me when I initiate that conversation to get that feedback, I'm not blindsided by it. And that was one thing that I learned from that experience. I had a manager, I was meeting with him weekly. He's telling me raving reviews. And then literally 2 weeks later, I got called into HR as an underperformer. And I was like, wait, you just signed off on my mid-year performance saying I'm a, you know, overachiever and all these great things. So I started having those conversations to, you know, course correct. If there was an opportunity for me to adjust, I could do that in my terms in a way versus like someone kind of holding that key behind them or just being that gatekeeper for my next level.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I guess when I think about process like that, like the example that you gave around the typos and the HR complaint, I guess it's easy for us to go, oh, that was that individual person's actions and decisions. But the thing that I always like to try and stop and think about is like, where has the system or the culture or something kind of supported that person to kind of think that that was an action that they had to take? So is there anything like in that journey that you kind of can see, you know, this behavior is being reinforced in this way that maybe we're not actually conscious of, but is quite evident when these things occur?
I'll follow up with another example to show like the polar opposite treatment, right? So you guys know the typos with me. I ended up on a PIP or performance improvement plan and all of that, right? Versus there were actual people in our engineering department at the time who was designing equipment that actually injured our operator. So we were working with titanium extrusions, and an operator literally got hit in the head with a titanium extrusion based on faulty calculations someone did, right? That and how that could have really been a fatality was kind of swept under the rug. And I wholeheartedly believe it was due to the fact that majority of the engineers at that job at the time were white male. I was the only Black woman, Black engineer, and everything that I did was kind of like, you know, dog and pony show, like everyone knew. Whereas whatever errors they made, no matter how cataclysmic they were, it was like, oh, they'll learn. They don't get it. And it's always been like for minorities, people of color, we grew up with this mentality, you got to work twice as hard as them. Because even our small, almost insignificant errors are huge to everyone, you know? Whereas when the shoe is on the other foot, in my experience, it's never been that. It's never been as broadcasted. The things that I've done great at work were never spoke to as loudly as my errors. So those are the things that I've kind of seen as a systemic thing where it's like, you can't do that. You have to be perfect. Or I have to strive to be exceptional when there's other people around me, specifically white males, that can be very regular. Like it's like they've never had to work harder than me, but for some reason I always have to.
I find that so interesting, and that's why I really appreciate having these conversations, because, you know, just sitting here, I'm racking my brain and I'm like, why is that? Like, do you understand and help me understand, like, where does that come from? Why is it that you have to work twice as hard as, say, another person of a different color?
Honestly, I think the best person who kind of helped answer this question was, her name is Dr. Joyce DeGrew or something to the effect. And she basically coined this term post-traumatic slave syndrome. And basically it talks about the ripple effect of like how Black people are intentionally viewed, are given these titles that other ethnic groups don't get. So when you look at the presentation of Asian communities, they're very hardworking. You look at even the African community, they're very hardworking. But for some reason, for the Black community, it's always they're lazy. They got to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They got to do more. Even if we do more than our counterparts, it's never deemed as enough. So I think, as someone alluded to in the comments, it is intentional. It is systemic, and there's honestly not one industry that isn't devastated by those preconceived notions about people of color.
It's really interesting, and I guess it gets me thinking then, if that is so deliberate, intentional, and systemically entrenched, like where do we start? And maybe it's a question we can't answer yet. It's like, where do we start by, unpicking this or changing some of that intentionality around it, particularly, with the sector and the type of work that you're in?
I think to really do some soul searching and or get to the point of acknowledging that it exists. So many people, when you have those conversations, it's like, oh, slavery was this long ago. Oh, you had a Black president. Oh, you're equal now. But there's still things, systemic things that are attacking and addressing Black people. Look at the treatment from FEMA with Katrina, and how Black people getting food were viewed as looters, versus white people who were doing the same thing and they were finding food. You get what I'm saying? Or like, look at the Black Lives Matter movement and how it's like, I can't say that without someone in the background saying all lives matter. I'm not saying your life don't matter. Like, we're literally saying our life matters. I'm not saying matters more, just matters. So it's like acknowledging that there was some damage done to our community. Every other community that experienced genocide or anything like that, they've gotten some form of restitution or some type of reconciliation. We've never gotten that. We have 400 plus years of chattel slavery, Jim Crow, South, and then now today. At what point did we heal? At what point did anyone have that conversation and say, hey, we treated this group of people wrong? That has never happened. And when we talk about reparations or anything from a Black community, it's like, what do they deserve that for? When a lot of rich white people have their wealth and have their stay off the backs of our ancestors. So it's, you got to have that conversation and acknowledge some wrong was done.
And Jess, feel free to jump in any time. I'm just firing off questions here, but like, at what level does that conversation start, that acknowledgement? Are we talking about senior level politician, government level? Are we talking about local level? Like, where does that conversation need to really start for it to actually do anything and make a difference?
I really feel like it needs to start from executive, the most senior level, because we got to think of the top down approach. That's what impacts the culture. It's that top 2%, top 10%, whatever. Like, that needs to happen there. And actionable, measurable objectives need to be, a resultant of that. Because otherwise, the conversations are great, but what are we going to do to even the playing field? What are we going to do? So that's like my biggest thing is like knowing my family were slaves, knowing that we literally came from nothing. That is not an exaggeration. My family were slaves. So working as hard as I had to just to be equal with people who may have already had exposure to engineering, exposure to the right resources, when it's like a scavenger hunt for us. We have to figure it out. The resources aren't there. My school didn't teach me the same things that other schools were teaching. I went to a program in my eighth grade or sixth to eighth grade years that was called the deseg program, as in desegregation, in St. Louis, Missouri. And this was early 2000s. So it's not like I'm 30. You get what I'm saying? So to be in a program where it's called deseg and we're getting bussed out to white schools, and just so we can have equality in education.
Yeah.
So it has to start at the top.
Yeah.
Just about that as well, just circling back to what you were saying about the significant moment of when this program, engineering related program, did get sort of referred to you, and that, you know, changed the course of pretty much your entire career and life, you know, overall.
Yeah.
I guess that's something that stuck out to me as well, things like that, where kids' lives are changed by, you know, the introduction of a possibility of a certain kind of future or a possibility of a certain kind of pathway. And I mean, I'm especially passionate about this working in education here in Australia. So I find that so powerful that, you know, it needs to definitely happen at the executive level, top down. But those moments are also so important of where, you know, kids can find a new, in a sense, opportunity for their futures through these kinds of programs. So yeah, so important.
Exposure is very important to children. A lot of kids, if they're not exposed to a different career field, they'll see what's accessible, what's tangible. Hey, what did my cousin or my mom, my dad do? Because prior to the program, my mom was a hairdresser, and then my dad worked in dialysis. So I was like, I'm squeamish, so medical field isn't an option. So I'm gonna do hair. I can't do hair. Like, that's not my thing. So like, without that program, who knows what I would have been doing, because I didn't see any options for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's better diversity of access and modeling happening at the children level than there is at the adult level? Like, was it a fairly sense of you're a child, possibilities are open as a child, regardless of background? Or do we still see that kind of segregation happening and it's not really an age thing?
I'm seeing more programs specifically geared towards children now. But outside, when I was around that age, I didn't know of any of that. I didn't know of any STEM programs for inner city kids outside of the program I was in. There was no after school program. There was nothing for my community to like help us see like there's something else. There are other fields. The high schools that I went to a trade school actually, and they never talked about engineering. You know, there was dentistry, cosmetology, law enforcement, and I actually signed up to do law enforcement because I didn't think, you know, hey, I had a chance on doing anything else. And I was committed to doing law enforcement until, unfortunately, in 2008, my best friend was killed by police as an unarmed Black man. So it was just like, okay, so that field is a definite no. I don't want any parts of that.
Yeah. That is, I can't imagine what that was like. And I guess there's profound moments like that that just sell a story, don't they? It's like, this is a story, this is how this sector is going to work. And so I'm either choosing to enter into that foregone conclusion or moving away from it. So, yeah. But there was one thing I was reading in some of the Facebook stuff that you were putting out in relation to your podcast, and I want to ask you about your podcast in a minute.
Okay.
But yeah, I promise we'll get there. Yeah, and I just was really interested to read about this notion of code switching that you were talking about, and so I'd love to just learn a little bit more about that and, you know, this sense of having to switch between personalities, personas, and things to show up in whether it's work or in the world, and kind of just learn a little bit more about that and the impact of that.
So code switching for me has always meant making sure I articulate in a specific way. I'm from St. Louis, and one of the things most St. Louis people can identify with is our pronunciation of E's and R's. So I might say her, and that means here, but that's just how it is, right? So like I had to intentionally like not act like I was from St. Louis or from the inner city because I wanted the same access and resources that other people got. I remember because of that job that I got fired from, when I was looking for other opportunities, there was plenty of recruiters that was like, you should actually just put D. Williams on your resume and not put Diamond, because they'll know that you're Black, basically.
Wow.
So like at every point I felt like I can't represent myself as a Black female in this space. It's best if I don't even use my real name. And, you know, I take pride in the name my parents gave me. Everyone should, right? That's the first thing your parents gave you. And to have to be questioned about should I actually use my name to get, you know, a job. Or, you know, when I did come into work, making sure I didn't present myself as, and I don't know if I can cuss on here, but I couldn't be too aggressive. I couldn't be questionative or ask too many questions, because then it's like, oh, there's the Black girl who is hard to deal with. So it was like a lot of those things that I had to like dance around. I couldn't come across as powerful as I am because I didn't want to intimidate. So it just felt like at every turn I had to like be some version of myself other than who I truly am. And that's the essence of code switching, is making yourself more palatable for the next person or the greater majority.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to actually ask Jess, like, have you had experiences where you've had to do similar types of code switching from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. It's actually a big conversation, or an ongoing conversation we have within our collective as well, with all different backgrounds, experiences, people that we're facing, you know, day to day. And yeah, we share a lot of experiences like that, really. I mean, even from, you know, a very young age, you're often taught in a particular way, you know, how to act in home versus out in public with different people, different types of families. You know, there's definitely this sort of fractioned versions of identity, I think, that can develop from a really young age, in a sense. Different, language, vocabulary, mannerisms, so much can be suppressed in different settings because it doesn't feel acceptable, or, you know, it's going to cause discomfort for people around you, supposedly. And even, you know, thinking about how often so many people are also named very white names, you know, like Jess, for example. But it's very interesting to think about, and to later sort of unpack so much of what we've been taught, even from family, from people close to us, and also learn how to oppose their expectations of us, because we know that it's not conducive to being our best full self. So it's difficult.
So how, Diamond, how have you, you know, reconciled that? So, you know, that switching or that fragmentation, and that, I imagine, would be purely exhausting. How do you reconcile that? And how do you, I mean, I remember reading that you just kind of said enough is enough. Like, is that kind of to the point that you could call it, or?
That's actually the PG version of that. What that really looked like for me was I basically became a shell of myself, to the point where I had anxiety. I was depressed a lot, just because I felt like, why is it everyone else could be themselves, but I can't be me. And like that kind of led me to a really dark depression. And I'm very grateful for my therapist and, you know, the work that we've been doing for the past 2.5 years. And that kind of like birthed knowledge and pettiness. I was tired of like feeling like, oh, I can't be knowledgeable, but display my full personality. I can't act this way in this specific industry because the avatar for what engineers look like is one way. So I just kind of got to this space. Eventually, I developed that strength to say to hell with it. Like, I'm going to go into interviews. I'm going to go into spaces being my full self. And if that's a problem for anyone, then I'm obviously not the candidate they want.
Yeah, that's awesome. Which I guess is a beautiful segue to learn a little bit more about knowledge and pettiness. Like you kind of touched on sort of how it birthed there a little bit, but love to hear more about, you know, the inspiration, you know, how you set it up and what you're doing with it.
So knowledge and pettiness, literally, I had this idea of just like doing something to like document my journey or my growth. And I thought about podcasting, and then I was like, hell, what am I gonna call it? And I was actually buying a book for a friend, and I'm very much that person where if I buy you something, I gotta have a quote in there and my signature. That's just my thing. So happened I put the quote in there, and then I got down to the part of signing my name, and I said sincerely, knowledge and pettiness. I was like, oh, that's me. Like that is everything I am. And that kind of like catapulted me to just start it. I'm big on just execution. That's just my thing. I was like, it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to fail forward, and I'm okay with it. And it's been a beautiful process to just the tagline for knowledge and pettiness is for those full of knowledge yet equally petty. And I feel like a lot of people can resonate with that, right? So there is a version of you that excels in your specific industry. And then there's a version of you at home or with your friends that has this laughter, this joy about it that sometimes you don't get to intersect those two spaces. So that's what I decided to do, and that's my hope, where people can present their full self and not feel like, oh, I have to be this specific thing for this podcast.
That's awesome.
I just love it so much. It's such a clever idea. And I also love the quotes in every book that you get from people, because that is the best, like most treasured books I have. It has this inscription from, you know, whoever gave it to me. It's like such a treasured thing. And I love the idea of, you know, a name being birthed so explosively but organically. You know, it's just like a moment that strikes you and you're like, that's it. Like that's, you know, how I'm going to go forward from now on. I think it's so powerful. Are there any common experiences that you've noticed come through on the show with the people that you've been chatting to?
The biggest thing that I, especially in this season that I'm kind of building now, a lot of people feel that, feel this like internal struggle where it's like, man, I want to be my full self in whatever capacity that may be. So whether it's someone who identifies in the LGBTQ plus community, or other people who may be white woman, white male, black woman, black male, who identifies with feeling like I can't be my full self. So I've gotten a lot of traction with people just wanting to reconcile what that bringing my full self looks like. So I've found having knowledge and pettiness being a safe space has been the best thing for all people.
That's awesome. I'm just noticing we've got a question come through from someone who's watching us live, Jillian. She's asking, how do we suggest others learn to discard their masks and step into their true selves? You know, what these individuals are doing that are coming on Knowledge and Pettiness. Like, are you seeing any kind of common things that people are doing that kind of we could recommend to others, or?
A lot of the people that I've met kind of reach this like point of the hell with it, right? Where it was just like, I'm exhausted trying to fit into your expectations of what I should be. And I think like for me, it really just took that time with my therapist and me having that heart to heart with myself on who am I and what where do I get the most joy presenting myself? What is the best form of me? Because those uncommunicated expectations, those unwritten rules are the things that's holding us down. So like when I got to the space of being okay with myself in whatever form that is, then I just kind of came to the hell with y'all think about me. I don't care. Because I became so confident in me that I didn't feel like I needed that mask anymore. I didn't see it. I think that mask that people may put on, they were started with good intentions, right? You act a certain way to be accepted. But what I realized is whatever you do to get in that space, you gotta keep doing to stay in it. And I think once people realize that whoever I present myself, whether that's in a relationship, a work experience, or whatever, if I am tailoring myself to this specific person's needs, I'm gonna always have to do that. Or I can just come in the door with who I fully am and accept it or not. And that's hard, right? Because you got to look at employment. You got to look at, how do I want to present myself for my family? If you're like cultures that's more family centric than the US, what does that look like? So those are the things I would say to like take that mask off, is really have that heart to heart with yourself, is on who am I and what version of myself do I feel the best, not how they feel, but how do I feel about myself. And if I'm okay with that, then they'll have to learn to be okay with it. And if not, they won't.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point you make at the end, because as you were talking, I was just thinking to myself, when I'm in the presence of someone who's showing up authentically, am I actually allowing that? And so I think there's an element also on the other side of learning to be accepting of someone who's showing up authentically and bringing their whole self and not trying to fit them into a box. Do you see that happening, in your experience, where it's actually on the other side of someone's discomfort, not allowing that true self to show up?
Yeah. It's something I struggle with. And I'm not immune to the things that I'm telling you guys. Like I'm in a relationship right now, with my fiance, and there's an expectation we all come into the door with our partner, and allowing him to be his full self, whatever that may be. And that's sometimes difficult because like I know a better way for that.
Yeah.
Right. We are,
Yeah.
but like I want to help so bad, right? But at the end of the day, it's like I'm still learning how to fully accept him. And I think how that happens is really having that conversation with myself and with him. The conversation with myself would be like, why don't I accept that? Why am I struggling with how he's presenting himself or articulating himself or anything like that? And then the question with him is, our dialogue with him is, how can I better support you?
And I'm just wondering, like, how does that articulate out into bigger institutions? So like the workplace, how do we start having the ability to be able to have those conversations in the workplace, for the workplace to kind of be able to broaden and its scope of accepting. Workplace is one example, but it could be, school, university, political environment. What do you think that looks like?
I think everything starts with a conversation and getting to know that person. Because we can judge a book by its cover. We can judge based on appearance, specifically when it's kind of been drilled in us. So when you look at the elements of colorism, where it's like lighter is good, darker is bad, all of that, like addressing those preconceived notions, and really extending that hand to get to know someone. I feel like I guess I hope at the when we're able to interact in person again, that's something that people will do, is really like extend yourself to people who aren't necessarily in your demographic or who aren't necessarily like you. I think we've gotten to the space, or maybe we've always been at the space, where differences are no. You have to be this way. But I think the more that we can accept that it's okay for you to be different, it's okay for me to be different, and accept people for who they truly are, I think that's where the sweet spot will be.
Powerful. Challenging ourselves and each other to, in a sense, also playing this sort of idea about being our true selves and vulnerability. I find that often being your, being really vulnerable, being authentic, and sometimes being your, disheveled, if you're feeling a bit disheveled, being your disheveled self, and sometimes really encourage that vulnerability and, honesty in others as well. Definitely that energy, feeds off of one another, being able to show up as, without your mask on.
Yeah.
Not a masquerade party. Others tend to not show up with their masks either, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess, where is your journey to next, Diamond? Like, what's on the cards for you? What are you going to be working on? Where's Nahledge&Pettiness going?
Oh man, what am I working on? Anything I can get my hands on. So next for me looks like I'll be launching a business called Quality Aero Systems next month. Yeah, next month is March. COVID time is very weird. Like it's very weird. Like
it's warping and distorting. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, March, and ultimately with that business, it's focusing on data and quality within the aerospace manufacturing industry. That's my happy space.
That's awesome.
Thank you. As far as Nahledge&Pettiness, my aim is to make sure that it's the safest space for all people. And really have a broad and diverse audience and guests, right? To not show that, Nahledge&Pettiness is a Black podcast. Yeah, certain things that may be more tailored to the Black community because, we have similar experiences, but really broadening that range and making it a safe space for everyone.
That's awesome. Well, it's been an absolute delight having you on tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for the audience for watching and those questions that came through. We really appreciate it. And we just really appreciate your time. I know it's 3 a.m. in the morning where you are. So thank you so much for getting up.
No problem.
And we definitely would love to stay in touch with you and hear how you're doing and hear how Nahledge&Pettiness and your company launch goes. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah. And thanks, Jess, for coming along tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
There were many moments where I was just a bit mesmerized. I was just listening as opposed to participating.
It was So I guess Life and Contradiction will be back. We're actually moving to a fortnightly format, which is really exciting. So we're going to have another show in 2 weeks, again, partnering with another co-host from the Way Over There Collective, which will be awesome. Next fortnight will be the Thursday, the 18th of February, again, 8 o'clock here on Chai Chat and Community. We're going to be chatting with Jonathan Rivera around conversational activism and the movement around having better conversations to be able to really make some change and crack open some of those topics that people generally don't want to talk about. So be really looking forward to chatting with Jonathan next fortnight. And so I guess until then, thanks to everyone for watching, and we will see you all in 2 weeks. All right, have a good night. See you, everyone.